Hello, I'm Jennifer Coons, reference librarian at the Haverford Township Free Library, with your Thursday, May 21st COVID check-in. So last week, I talked about infodemic.blog, which was a site, a resource that can help you better critically think about the news that you're reading about COVID-19. And as a librarian, it's very important for me to empower the regular Joe or Josephine to better assess what they're seeing in the news about this disease. There's such a huge influx of information coming out from every media outlet around, and it's easy to get confused. It's easy to get afraid, or just like news fatigue or frustrated. So I'm continuing this theme today with one of my favorite resources, which is called Health News Review. You can see at the top, this is the address, Health News Review, up there, healthnewsreview.org. The purpose of this resource is to apply a set of very stringent criteria to health news stories. And so they basically review news stories about health, internationally really. And they let you know if the story had any problems. So this organization has been around for almost 14 years. And I'm just going to take a moment and tell you what I always do when I look at an online source to assess its trustworthiness and currency. Now, there's no 100% guarantee, but these are the things I look for. So I'll go to the About page, or I will scroll down to the very bottom of the home page, which will often have information too, but this has an About Us. So actually, you know what? I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. I'm actually going to show you. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. And often there's an About. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking for faces and I'm looking for biographies or, bios of the contributors. I'm also looking for partnerships. Looks like there's a partnership with the University of Minnesota School of Public Health here. Here we have lots of faces, which I like, because I want to know who's behind this online source. I want to know, is anyone making any money off of it? And no, it looks like they aren't. It's completely nonprofit, which means that any money that they're making from donations, it looks like they used to be funded by partially by the University of Minnesota School of Public Health, before they lost their funding. But I want to look at who's behind. There's a wide range of contributors and editors. You have MDs affiliated with various universities. You have PhDs. You have health writers. You have MPHs, which is a master. You have people who are specialized in public health. Here's Professor Emeritus of Emergency Medicine at the Albany Medical College. And you could just scroll through. I think there must be 30 or people or something on this editorial board. So that helps me feel better about the site. And it's one of the reasons it's one of my favorite resources. It's truly nonprofit. I can see who's behind it. And that helps me. So I'm going to just show you a little bit about what they do before we get to some of the COVID news stories that they're looking at. Here's their review criteria. Whenever a health news story comes out about a new kind of treatment, a new kind of drug, a new therapy, a new lifestyle change, the staff at healthnewsreview.org. That is my dog. Somebody's clearly at the door. So anyway, it's the plumber, in case you wanted to know. Okay, so they apply 10 criteria to each news story that they look at. The first criterion is, does the story adequately discuss the costs of the intervention? So sometimes there'll be a story about a wonderful cancer treatment that can help you and your loved ones, but it costs $10 million. So thank you for the story, but I can't afford it, and my insurance won't pay for it. Criteria number 2, does the story adequately quantify the benefits of the intervention? Is it talking about how effective is the intervention? Like they just created this whole story, but maybe it's just, it increases health by 0.003% or something like that, which isn't too significant. Criterion number 3, does the story adequately explain or quantify the harms of the intervention? Many news health stories, articles, are focused too much on the benefits, especially if it's put out by the actual institution or company behind the drug, treatment, or therapy. And this makes the story more happy if they're focusing on the benefits rather than the harms. So they don't often include the potential harms of whatever intervention we're talking about. Criterion number 4, does the story seem to grasp the quality of the evidence? So how rigorous was the testing or evidence behind this new treatment or drug? Did they only test it on 8 people? Was it mostly based on anecdotal information, or were these like really rigorous scientific methods behind the evidence? Because you want evidence, right? If there's a new treatment or therapy or drug, you want to know, like, what's the evidence that supports this? Criterion number 5, does the story commit disease mongering? This is a big one. Sometimes new conditions or diseases actually may just be opportunities to medicalize and monetize normal states of health. This is not the case with COVID-19, obviously, but with other things like, I don't know, restless leg syndrome or something like that. And disease mongering is like, oh, by the way, you have this disease and it's really bad and you need this treatment that we will make money off of. Okay, criterion number 6, does the story use independent sources and identify conflicts of interest? This is important. Sometimes the research that a news story is based on is from an organization that stands to benefit somehow, usually financially, if you use the treatment or drug that they are that they're supporting or that they have come up with. If there is a conflict of interest, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but we want to know that. We want the news story to let us know, oh, by the way, okay, so this drug that we're reporting on was created by this drug company who has done the research. So just be aware of that. Criterion number 7, does the story compare the new approach or treatment or drug or therapy with existing alternatives? Sometimes when there's a new kind of health intervention, a news report will focus so much on it as if it's reinventing the wheel, when in fact there are other treatments out there that are just as effective. Criterion number 8, does the story establish the availability of the treatment or test or product or procedure? So you'll read about a wonder therapy for, let's say, Parkinson's disease or multiple sclerosis, and it looks very hopeful, but it's only available in Brazil. So that doesn't help you. Criterion number 9, and sometimes the stories will not say that. They'll just talk about this great, treatment, and they'll be like, oh, that sounds great, and maybe your loved one could use it, and when you dig deeper, you find out that it's only available in a country really far away. Criterion number 9, does the story establish the true novelty of the approach? Is this approach really any different than existing approaches? Is this therapy or drug really that different? Maybe it's new, but it's not necessarily better. Okay, so criterion number 5, does the story appear to rely solely or largely on a news release? Sometimes news stories rely solely or largely on public relations release or a media blast from the information, and the information came from the company itself that has created the therapy. So there's a little bit of there's a conflict of interest in there, and also it's not necessarily informational. It's advertising, it's marketing. So that's something to be aware of when you're reading news stories too. And so this editorial board, those faces that we just looked at a couple minutes ago, these staff members, these folks apply this 10 criteria that I just went over to health news stories to help you better critically assess what you're looking at. So I'm going to go back up, and as I go up, disappearing. a little bit. And I'm going back to the homepage, and I'm going to go to the top banner, which has, so first of all, healthnewsreview.org is offering online training for journalists, which is great, in I think 3 or 4 different languages. They're offering online training for COVID-19, covering the COVID-19 pandemic. Here is the healthnewsreview.org staff is talking about be careful when you're reading about COVID-19 vaccine news, just be aware of certain things. And this is, so, oopsies, sorry, I don't know what just happened. Going back to the homepage, a little trouble with navigation there. All right, so now we're going to this story. Scientists upset over mutant coronavirus story. So a lot of scientists were upset that they felt like this story over the mutant coronavirus strain was misleading. So I'm going to click on that, and they're going to talk about the problems with that story, and I won't go. So here's one of the, somebody tweeted, one of the scientists tweeted, the LA Times article is infuriating. So much misinformation based on just that preprint. Remember how I talked about preprints? Those are research studies that are posted on a server that scientists can look at and share information. And it's a good thing because globally, all of these health professionals can look closely at the research and come to solutions and share information and all that stuff. However, other people can also look at this, and the stories have not been peer reviewed. They haven't been around long enough. There's even a disclaimer on the preprint site that states, and I quote, so the preprint site is called bioRxiv. It says, our site is receiving many new papers on coronavirus SARS-CoV-2. A reminder, these are preliminary reports that have not been peer reviewed. They should not be regarded as conclusive, guide clinical practice or health-related behavior, or be reported in news media as established information. And it's hard because when we read a story, we think it's established information. Okay, so apparently in this article in the LA Times, they took quotes from the author's personal Facebook page. It was an anonymous quote, which is not a good thing when you have a news story. You want to have people behind quotes. So here's the headline is very provocative. A mutant coronavirus has emerged, even more contagious than the original study says. Okay, so scary, mutant coronavirus has emerged. So it says study says. So the study they're talking about is from this, and you can click on it, but if I click on it, then it'll mess up my whole presentation because you'll lose me and you won't even see the page, and it just won't be a good thing. But if you look at the study, it is from that preprint page, has not been peer reviewed by experts in epidemiology and coronavirus epidemiology. So, so this little blurb, this blog post is discussing the problems with this news story. That the story doesn't have proper context, and it's misleading. Like there's some truth to it. There is a mutant strain that they found, but it doesn't mean that we're all, it's not necessarily a risk, and it doesn't really mean what the normal person, the normal Joe or Josephine off the street would think reading the paper. So there's important context that was not included in that story. So it turns out if you see this, the Los Angeles Times, who originally reported that story, did update the story later on the same day. Also, our own Philadelphia Inquirer printer came out with a story on the same day saying there's no real evidence that the coronavirus is becoming more contagious, despite what you might have seen online. So they are contextualizing the story more. And then, so what they're doing down here is they're listing 3 news stories that were more balanced about this this new mutant coronavirus strain. And I love, this is my favorite. The problem with stories about dangerous coronavirus mutations. That's an article in the Atlantic. So again, it's one of my favorite resources. That is a resource about health news and about how to empower people to think, to use critical thinking skills when looking at news about health. And right now, looking at news about COVID-19. Let's use our brains, folks. Let's not let the news manipulate us and give us knee-jerk reactions. Let's take a step back, take a breath, and think critically. And if you would like to know more about how to do that, if you're a nerd like me, go to healthnewsreview.org and check out their website. Fantastic organization. Thank you so much for being with me today. See you next Thursday. Stay healthy, stay safe. Wash your hands for 20 seconds. Wear a mask when you go into public places. And bye.